Okay. Okay. I need a break from talking about things that are all fast and whatnot. Let's finally get into infantry. And where else to start but with... Oh, should we start at the top or at the bottom? Top or bottom? Top or bottom? Top or bottom? Let's start at the bottom. Make sure I didn't grab any little infantry. All right, let's do this. Tier list of all infantry in the game... All light infantry. What classifies as light infantry? Generally, when I go through a faction, I take their bottom infantry tier. Maybe it's 1 or 2 units, and those are their light infantry. Now, for dwarves, dwarf warriors, and miners are probably going to be on this list. You might be like, they're not light infantry, they're heavy infantry. It depends on how you're breaking it down. I'm breaking it down by within a roster, light, medium, heavy. Like skill and veterancy wise, but you could be literal and just talk about armor values, but then it's like, well, does that make plague monks, censer bearers chaff infantry? Well, no, they're berserker infantry. Okay, so now do we have chaff infantry, heavy infantry, berserker infantry? What about like commando infantry? Because like, what does that make death runners? Death runners aren't really berserkers because they're not supposed to take front to back fights. So anyway, I don't know. How I'm going to define it is just a faction's bottom cheap infantry, and then a faction's mid tier, and then a faction's high tier, right? So these are low tier chaff infantry. Okay. How does the tier list work? I've been through this a lot, but in case, you have to remember that I have to explain this every time because some people, this is the first tier list of mine they've ever clicked on. So we have to explain it for them. We're taking all of the light infantry in the entire game. We're wrapping them up in one big cluster, and we're going to rank them against each other. We do not factor in campaign or lord or technology buffs that you can get in campaign. I don't really care that Lord Skrulk can buff plague monks a bunch, and if you get this and that technology, they could beat the entire world. Cool, but then I would have to compare them to Chosen that get all buffed up by this stuff, and I'd have to compare them to, like, Flagellants buffed up by Volkmar the Grim, and that's just a confusing tier list because then where do the Flagellants that are buffed up by Karl Franz go? Because he has different buffs for Flagellants that aren't as good as Volkmar's. So that's just a pain in the ass. We are just going to compare the units on their own stats if you load them into the game. Now, I do talk about gold a lot, and some people have issue with that because in campaign, gold doesn't matter. Well, I think of gold like this. It is a unit's rarity, and again, you've probably heard this, but someone's clicking on the video for the first time, yada yada. The example I keep using is Skaven slaves and savage orcs, which I think are in both of this list, but if you just rank something off of its stats, the most expensive unit would be in S tier, the worst unit would be in D tier, the cheapest unit would be in D tier every time because the more expensive unit has more stats. But also in the real world, that's not how it works. You don't often see a Skaven slave, just one Skaven slave fight just one savage orc. Obviously the savage orc would win. It's not interesting to talk about. What I am talking about here is how many Skaven slaves would a single savage orc usually run into. Probably about 4 or 5. And that's represented in their cost as well. You can usually afford 4 or 5 Skaven slaves compared to 1 savage orc. So it roughly works out that way. All right, let's get into it. Skaven slaves, D tier. Skaven slaves are terrible. And I know I just said I factor in cost. I am factoring in cost, still terrible. I hate Skaven slaves. I think they are garbage. They are an objective waste of your funds. The only reason to ever buy them is in campaign. If you don't have any buildings for some reason, then I guess build some freaking Skaven slaves, bro. Or to put them on top of artillery teams to protect them from like light cavalry, so at least the Skaven slaves will take the charge or something. But with finite unit slots, they aren't even worth the gold to just put them in your army. You can only buy them if you have 100 gold left over. If you have any more gold left over, you should have spent it on something else. Like, I don't know. If you can afford 3 Skaven slaves, you should probably just grab a clan rat. Like, ugh. I hate them. They break pretty much on the charge from any units. They don't hold for any amount of time. They don't do any damage. They don't do anything. Like they're just there, but they don't even hold space. So why are you bothering? I hate them. I think Skaven slaves are terrible. Clan rats. Clan rat spears, clan rats with shields, clan rat spears with shields. I factor all those in. So the Skaven slave spears are also factored in. Clan rats are B tier. Clan rats are solid. They have a passive that gives them more melee defense when they are like fresh. So at the start of the battle, they will have a lot of melee defense, and then it'll kind of falter as they start to falter. They're light infantry. They're weak to burning head and that kind of thing. And they are Skaven units, so they're pretty cowardly, but they are also dirt cheap. They're cheaper than a lot of the other chaff units on this list. And they're actually the second most elite infantry that's not second most elite. Second lowest from the bottom. And they're still cheaper than some other factions' first options. So Very cheap, very chipper. Clan rats do exactly what you need a chaff frontline to do. They're good. Skink cohorts with javelins, I'm going to put them also in B tier. Some solid damage poison jabs that they can chuck at stuff for 1 or 2 little volleys that can do decently. After that, they're a pretty middling little unit for having 450 gold cost. So they barely scrape into B. I'm honestly thinking about putting them in C. They're okay. You mostly just take them for the javelin throw and then hope for the best. After that, just make them chase down already routing units or harass archers or something. Die for the great cause. They don't do that much damage. Skink cohorts go down in C. After multiple nerfs in a row, these guys for 325 gold are just not very good. They're sort of shielded. They do almost no damage. They rout at the drop of a hat. They're quite terrible. They're not that fast either. Skink cohorts just have not been having a great time since they've got nerfed several times over. And they used to be pretty overpowered, so they deserved the nerfs, but maybe stop nerfing them or start giving them a couple more buffs here and there, because this is getting sad. High Elf Spearmen, as far as light infantry goes, these guys are going to pop all the way up to A tier. Debatably S or A, but High Elf Spears are really, really good. Incredibly high melee defense. Not great armor. As far as other light infantry go, still, no light infantry really has that great of armor, but not great armor. Good bonus versus large. Martial prowess gives them a ton of extra stats as long as their HP is nice and high. The only reason they're not an S tier is they are an elven unit, which means they have low HP. So they are incredibly weak to spells like Pendulum or Burning Head, or honestly even Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma or something like that. And if you're a unit that has more melee attack than them, you can churn through Spearmen quite quickly. If mass hits them, they'll just kind of evaporate, because not having a lot of mass, not having a lot of HP makes your models pretty easy to kill off. It keeps them out of S tier. They're still an A. So we're talking about a great unit, but not a ton of HP on the Spearmen per model. Dread Spears are going to go in B. Some similar nice things to say about them as the High Elf Spears, all the similar negative things to say about them as High Elf Spears, but High Elf Spears have a much better melee defense than Dread Spears do, and I feel like High Elf Spears also do a little bit more damage. They hold a lot longer, so Dread Spears are just kind of inferior in a lot of ways, and they kind of try and make up for having murderous prowess. After a certain amount of time in battle with enough kills, you get this proc where they get a bunch more leadership and some more damage for a little bit, and then it fades away. But I don't think that's enough to take them out of B and put them in A next to the High Elf Spears. They're still pretty squishy, and for 450, they can't afford to be that squishy. At least High Elf Spears have a melee defense next to Chosen to stay alive, so yeah, B. Joining them in B is their compatriot, the Bleak Swords. Bleak Swords are the offensive version of the Dread Spears' defense. Still pretty bad offense. They don't kill anything particularly quickly, and for 450 gold, being an elf that is squishy, it's pretty easy to kill them off. Now they're B tier. I'm not saying they're a bad unit, but they're just not great either. They're fine. Damaging, squishy, a little faster than usual because they're elves. They're okay. Zombie Pirate Deckhands polearms back up into A tier with them. 400 gold, spread formation, halberds that are unbreakable and do a lot of damage to cavalry that is in their way, and they can honestly hold back infantry for quite a long time too. They are weak to archers, but that is about it. Otherwise, they will trade fine versus a lot of things. I guess they're also weak to berserker type units like Marauder Berserkers or Plague Monks or something, but yeah, you wouldn't expect 400 gold lightly armored infantry to beat 600 or 750 gold infantry blenders. So these guys are good. Good melee defense. Good HP pool, unbreakable. No complaints. Zombie Pirate Deckhands mobs, however, I'm going to throw all the way down into C tier. They did get some buffs recently to reduce their cost, but still, even with that, I think they're C tier. They do no damage back, which is fine if you just want a frontline blocker. That's fine. But I think they're pretty easy to kill. So even as a blocker, they aren't that good, in my opinion. So no damage back. Don't take that much damage to get through them. They are unbreakable. They are cheap. Those are two nice things, but I don't think that puts them up into B tier. I still think they're C. They're incredibly slow too, so you can't even use them as a rushing tool. Skeleton Spearmen. Wait, no, Skeleton Warriors. Skeleton Warriors are D tier. Skeleton Warriors are terrible. Sometimes the Tomb Kings have to take them just because they have to, but they don't want to. And in campaign, it's hard to compare because these guys are literally free. So I'm going to be using the multiplayer pricing because, okay, they're free. For free, yes, they're S tier because they're free, but like, Let's be serious about this. Yeah, if we're talking about the free campaign variant, S tier, because they're freaking free. In multiplayer, when they're 325, they're not that good. Pretty easy to kill, not that good of melee stats. They're just kind of the tax the Tomb Kings have to pay to have a front line at all, and then all their other units carry. But Skeleton Warriors are abysmal. Zombies, other end of the spectrum, are S tier. For 100 gold, they are a massive HP sink. They don't do any damage. I acknowledge that. They do no damage to anybody ever. But for 100 gold, unbreakable, massive HP sink, some of the most mass in the game, some stuff that can plow through infantry will get stuck in zombies and it cannot move. Zombies are a nuisance. They are a mire, a quagmire, a pit of mud you cannot get out of. They are impossible to escape, and you just have to stop and kill them, and it's very annoying. And they're only 100 gold, so even after you kill them, you don't feel good. You're just like, well, fine, I got rid of you, finally. Get away from me. Zombies are super good. S tier. Any faction would love to have 100 gold zombies. Skeletons. Skeleton Warriors are going to go down and see. They don't do enough damage to be worth taking the sword and board variant. The skeleton spear is significantly better for not that much more money, so there's no real reason to take the basic skeleton. He's C tier. Bronze shield, low armor, low damage output, pretty easy to kill for 300 gold. Decent blocker, I guess. Night Goblins, A tier. This is both the regular Night Goblin and the Fanatic. The regular Night Goblin, D tier, worthless, garbage unit. But I don't feel like copy and pasting the same unit card twice and just saying this one's the Fanatic, the other one's not the Fanatic, because then how do you know which one's the Fanatic if you just glance at it? So it doesn't matter. The non-Fanatic version's D tier. Low armor, low leadership unit that's too expensive to just apply poison and do no damage. But who cares about that? The Fanatic Spinning Loon one, fantastic unit. A tier for sure. Busting through elite front lines or getting a ton of damage onto cavalry blobs or any blob really. The Spinning Loon Fanatics are great for the Greenskins. The only reason they're not up in S tier is they still do cost a decent pretty penny. At 525, their spinning loons can be hard to control, so sometimes even though you aim correctly, they can just loop off and go hit your own troops for some serious friendly fire problems. And then the low leadership of your rather expensive, cheap unit can get them to rout at the drop of a hat, and they can't even use their spinning loons if they take enough damage on the advance. So there are some negatives, but the upsides are up enough that the Night Goblin spinning loon fanatics definitely deserve A tier. Basic goblins with spears, A tier as well. 300 gold spear infantry, charge up Wah very quickly, and then they get to proc Wah, get a bunch of extra melee stats for a little bit. Goblins are great. Goblins with their nice anti-large and melee defense can hold on for quite a while as far as spooked little goblins go. And they're the glue that hold a lot of greenskin builds together. We only recently got goblin sword and board. Before that, goblin spears were the default front line all the time. Empire Swordsman, I'm going to put him in B tier. I would have put him in C, even if I did this list the other day, but on the new patch, I've been playing a little bit more Empire, and Swordsman, I realized actually have better stats than I thought they did, so they do okay as a frontline unit for only 375. They're fine. They're fine. Yeah. Nothing negative to say about them, nothing positive to say about them. They're okay. Empire Spears, however, those guys go in A tier. 40 melee defense and shields for 350 gold is pretty clutch. They'll lose to a lot of front lines, but they will lose slowly or force you to spend spells on them. And then there's always more men of the Empire behind them ready to take up their spot in the line. Spearmen are fantastic. A lot of factions would love to have them. Cheap, chipper, strong. Dwarf Warriors. I lumped great weapons together. Yes, I did. Okay. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. And Dwarf Warriors. Oh, that's probably an S tier unit. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking that hard about it. Dwarf Warriors and Dwarf Warriors, great weapons, S tier. Very high armor, very high leadership, spell resistance, good, really, really solid melee defense, okay melee attack, and pretty bad damage overall. They're just an unbreakable wall. They stand there, they watch the tides of the enemy flow over them, and they watch the tides of the enemy recede into nothingness, whittling away. Dwarf Warriors are fantastic. Any roster would love to have them. Dwarves in general, their infantry is going to perform very well in these tier lists because they have some of the best infantry in the game intentionally, because their roster is lacking cavalry and real magic and monsters and all that stuff. Their infantry have to carry a lot of weight, and they do. But that doesn't hurt them on this list. I'm just telling you why dwarf units are usually going to end up in the S and A area. They deserve it. And the dwarf warriors are fantastic for their cost. Anybody would love to have them. Miners of blasting charges, I'm going to put them in A. They took some recent cost nerfs and their blasting charges got less damage. So double nerfs on them takes them from S to A. High armor, pitifully low melee stats for the miners and miners with blasting charges. And they have some armor piercing, but they don't have the melee attack or like this attack speed to really utilize it. So they mostly just use their blasting charges and then hope their armor can carry them through the day. But that still makes them an A tier unit. They can delete most other light infantry on the charge, and that high armor does get them through a lot of battles. So good for them. Basic Norskin Marauders. See, on paper, Marauders should be better than they are, but these guys just get deleted every time. Every time I take Marauders, they get insta-killed and don't do anything. So stats or no stats, lived experience rules my opinion of you, and my opinion of you is quite low. Are you useless? No. Sometimes you're okay, but I generally don't have a great opinion of you, Marauders. You're low armor, bronze shields, stupid little flabby bodies. You will all die quickly, and I need you to not die quickly. I need you to win. Spearmen at arms, the Bretonnian peasants. I will put them in A tier, similar to the Empire Spearmen. Cheap, high melee defense, good at bonus versus large, great at holding a front line for Bretonnia. No real complaints there. Peasant mobs, C, barely. I want to put them in D tier. They're a little more useful than Skaven slaves. 100 gold, low leadership, low stats in every dimension, but they hold somehow longer than Skaven slaves feel like they do. Maybe they're just supported by Grail leaks, but I don't know. Peasant mobs, for some reason in my mind, do better than Skaven slaves. Maybe I'm just hallucinating, but I barely am keeping them out of D. I want to put them in D so bad, but I won't. Men-at-Arms, shielded or unshielded, the sword variant is in C. Unlike their spear brethren, their melee stats are just too low. They're not that good at being offensive, but then they're also not that good at being defensive. And for only a little bit less gold than the spear variant, they're pretty bad. You might as well just spend the extra money on the spears and get the extra melee defense. So, yeah. See. Dryads. Dryads are A tier. A light infantry that causes fear is pretty rare, but a light infantry with magic attacks, physical resistance, and decent armor while also being in spread formation is also quite rare. Dryads also have Vanguard deployment, so a lot of positive things about them. They are somewhat squishy, and 550 makes them one of the more expensive units on this light infantry list. So they're not cheap, but they definitely deserve A tier for what they can get done. Not exactly Marauder Berserkers level of damage, but they do good work. So good for you, Dryads. More offensive than defensive, though. On the defensive side is the Eternal Guard. Eternal Guard are one of the cheapest spears to have armor piercing. That's nice, I guess. And they can be shielded, can be unshielded. But at nearly 500 gold when they're shielded, I believe they're 475. These guys are crazy squishy. They have super low HP. So if any real infantry combatant gets to them, or a spell, or a cavalry charge, they just melt under the pressure. And for 500 gold, I do treat them a little more harshly than I treat like the Empire Spearmen or something, where it's like, yeah, 350 gold, it got deleted, whatever. 475 gold and it got deleted. I expect more out of you. Speaking of expecting more out of someone, Ungor Spearman herds are going to go in C tier. Light infantry, incredibly low leadership. They have stalk on the advance, which is nice, and they have Vanguard, which is nice. Those two things are keeping them out of D tier. Other than that, Ungor Spearman herds don't have enough melee defense to hold very long, and they don't have enough offensive capacity to kill anything, but they're not that cheap either. They're more expensive than a skeleton warrior, so Beastmen need them, so they take them. But if like you had the option of other infantry, you would take other infantry over the Ungor Spearmen for sure. And speaking of other infantry, Ungor Herd is D tier for sure. Basic Ungor Herd's terrible, just terrible. Not as tanky as the Ungor Spearman Herd brethren. No bonus versus large, and very, very, very little offensive upside. they don't beat like anything in melee, and you still pay like 300 gold for them. So no, they're pretty terrible. Only Skaven slaves and skeleton warriors even rival them for their uselessness. Blue horrors are an S tier light infantry unit with magic and fire damage shots that they can shoot off at stiff. They're kind of like the skin cohorts of javelins, but the skin cohorts provide poison and do a little bit more damage. The blue horrors have more ammunition than that, I believe a longer range and more consistent firing. Outside of that, they have the barriers of Tzeentch, and then they're demonic, so they get physical resistance as well, and they have hybrid melee stats, so after they shoot their blue fire all over your army, they can just run in and cause disruption and be a nuisance. And if cavalry tries to shut them down, it takes cavalry a long time to kill that many models. Blue horrors are very solid. A strong front line for Tzeentch, and Demons of Chaos, even when they have the option, Demons of Chaos do take blue horrors quite frequently. So in this kind of theory crafting thing, we do have a faction that has the option of a lot of light infantry and picks the blue horrors. So very good stuff. Blue horrors are fantastic. Marauders of Slaanesh, I believe this is all variants. I didn't want to just have a bunch of Marauders of Slaanesh around here. So yes, Marauders of Slaanesh, Hell Scourges, Spears, or otherwise are an A tier infantry unit. Marked by Slaanesh gives this chaff infantry immune to psychology. They will never terror out, but their leadership also doesn't get lowered by fear, which is super nice. Their Hell Scourge and Spear variants have incredible melee defense capacity, making them rather defensive, and their Hell Scourge does give poison, while Spears gives bonus versus large, and then their basic sword variant does okay at just punching through front lines. Okay. The basic sword variant is the least good of them, but it's also the cheapest. Fast units, a little bit of physical resistance, ITP, quite strong. Still not gonna like tear through any front line, but they definitely deserve A tier. They're quite good. I was debating S, but they're a little squishy to get into S, so A is fine for the Marauders of Slaanesh. Gnoblars, S tier as well. 200 gold for a model count this insanely high. Gnoblars are definitely worth 200 gold. They're just a nuisance that gets in between your toes, stops you from moving forward, pushes back against you, is just annoying, so you have to stop and kill them like the zombies. Zombies are a little bit better. If there was an S+, I'd put zombies and dwarf warriors in it, and Gnoblars and blue horrors just in S, but they are definitely above A. Gnoblars are very good. Now, their low leadership makes them easy to rout, but they're only double the cost of a zombie. They're half the cost of miners with blasting charges? No, they're less than half the cost of that. Yeah. Gnoblars are fine. They're more defensive than offensive. Like, they'll just kind of run into a front line and then stand there and make you take forever killing them, but that's about it. They won't get through anything. But they're good. They're good little Gnoblars. High model count. Nurglings. See. Nurglings are terrible. I just don't like them. They're squishy. They don't feel like they should be in their stat card, but they are. Nurglings are insanely squishy. They die very fast. They don't get that much damage out. They have magic damage and physical resistance for being demonic, I guess. No, I'm talking myself into B tier, but I can't do it. Okay, they're in C tier based off of vibes. I have never taken a Nurgling or watched a replay with a Nurgling or seen a campaign with a Nurgling, and it's like, oh wow, Nurglings are great. My friend right now is playing a Epidemius. The same campaign I'm playing with him where I'm playing Ark and he's playing Epidemius, he has Nurgling armies, and in the auto resolve it says Pyrrhic victory, and he says, nah, I can do better, and he loads in and he gets a decisive defeat because they just get massacred. Nurglings are friggin' terrible, but I know they're light infantry and all that stuff, and they have poison and they're demonic, but I'm keeping them in C. Screw you. These guys have betrayed me and my friends so many times. I can't take them out of C. Screw this unit. Nurglings suck. Nurglings blow. They just die. I hate them. Peasant Long Spears for Grand Cathay is an S tier light infantry unit. Somehow these guys feel like they have as much mass as zombies at times. Not all the time, but it feels like it. Really good bonus versus large stat, and they're one of the best chaff spears at just swinging at stuff. I don't know if that's game 3 like improvements or something, but if you walk into peasant long spears with a large unit, that large unit is going to die so fast. You have to get out of there immediately, and it feels like older spear units don't swing that intensely because their stat line isn't crazy compared to other spears, but for some reason their damage output is just wild. So peasant long spears are amazing. Can get buffed up by harmony if they're defending ranged units nearby, and that gives them just more leadership, which makes them hold even longer. And for 350 gold, it's quite a steal. No shields, no armor, does make them susceptible to ranged fire or chariots or something, but yeah, their damage output is pretty crazy. Goblin laborers, D tier. I know they're only 150 gold. I would rather have a Skaven slave than a goblin laborer, and Skaven slaves are cheaper, and I already told you how I feel about Skaven slaves. So goblin laborers are worse. Goblin laborers break on the charge from things. Chaos dwarves can't even bother keeping them in line. They are terrible. They are terrible. Terrible. Orc laborers, on the other hand, I'll put them in B tier. For 100 gold more, they have more leadership and more health than goblin laborers. They actually have a pretty good health pool for 250 gold. Still low leadership overall, but now they provide armor piercing and a much higher mass. The armor piercing, the mass, the leadership, the health. That is enough to take them all the way from D tier with their goblin laborer cousins and put them in B. That is a tenuous B. I want to put them in C, but I can't justify it comparing them to some of the other stuff. They are still solid. And if you give them some chevrons or something, then you have an armor-piercing chaff unit that won't rout as quickly. They're acceptable. They get B. There is your light infantry tier list. Hopefully it is to your liking. If it is not, comment below what you disagree with. Just don't be a dick about how you phrase your comments. Just say, hey, I see what you said about Nurglings. I disagree because of this, this, and this. Cool tier list, though. That is a very acceptable comment. That brings a smile to my face. Does not bring a smile to my face. You're trolling if you think Skaven slaves are D tier. No, brother, I'm not trolling. I just have an opinion that is different than yours. All right, have a good day. Rawr.
Subscribe, yes, yes.